am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time. to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summit of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until that is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But that is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the city. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friend, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, This must become true. And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghanies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
We must have freedom now. Liberty must be militantly grasped from those who hold it from us, because no lie can live forever. Freedom is what we fight for. Freedom is what we'll get. We'll use our spirit as a shield to move mountains, but will not destroy our soul. There is a constant undercurrent of violence which denies equal rights to black men, equal education to black children, and respect to the black woman. This must be stopped, because no lie can live forever. Liberty, emancipation, oh freedom. Accept the physical violence in public now, but do not suffer spiritual or emotional violence later. The nation has been sickened by the slashings, the bullwhips, the cattle prods, the fleeing men, the brutal attacks, the indignations, the crying children, but no lie can live forever. We are the soul in which the seed of our new liberty takes root. We are the beginning of victory, dignity, and strength. Unto him who is able to keep us from falling and lift us from the dark valley of despair to the bright mountain of hope. The greatest of all virtues is love. We are the foundation in which the balance of our determination is built upon. We are faithful to our dream and to our God. Unto him who is able to keep us from turning back into the midnight of desperation and lead us into the daybreak of joy. We are the weapons, the ammunitions of our non-violent black struggle's perseverance. Black is beautiful. The quality of a person's scale of values is far more superior than that of any culture which attempts to enslave us. Gird up your loins for the hard battle ahead, because no lie can live forever. If a man had nothing to live for, lest he learn. Unto him who is able to keep us from falling into the pit of destruction and into the expanse of victory. We are the reality in which the dreams of our forefathers held deep within their souls should fly free. The dreams of life's longing for itself, the dreams of a truer, newer nation. Unto him who is able to guide us to the belief that there is a plan and a purpose for our lives, and that there are forces beyond our control working the universe to bring about good and the creation of a world of brotherly love to become special instruments of his will. We are the courage which our mothers and fathers dreamed of for us, and for generations to come springs forth and shines like the sun. Unto him who is able to lead us out of the struggle of fear. And we must unflinchingly face our fears. This confrontation will to some degree grant us power, because no lie can live forever. We must master our fears through love, the kind of love God faced when he died on the cross for us all. Such love confronts evil without flinching. We cannot master fear through death. For a Christian there is no death. The God who brought our whirling planet from a primal vapor has led to human pilgrimage for these many centuries, can most assuredly lead us through death's dark valley of fear, and into the daybreak of eternal life. His will is perfect. His purpose is too extensive to be confined to a limited receptacle of bondage and the narrow prisms of the scars of slavery put on us by the other man and not the brother man. Because I say to you, my brothers and sisters, that no lie can live forever. Wade in the water, children. Wade. God's gonna trouble the water. Martin Luther King Jr. was born January 15, 1929, and died April 4, 1968. He was born Michael Luther King Jr., but later had his name changed to Martin. His grandfather began the family's long tenure as pastors of the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, serving from 1914 to 1931. His father has served from then until the present, and from 1960 until the death of Martin Luther, acted as co-pastor. Martin Luther attended segregated public schools in Georgia. Graduating from high school at the age of 15, he received a Bachelor of Arts degree in 1948 from Morehouse College, a distinguished Negro institution of Atlanta, from which both his father and his grandfather had graduated. After 3 years of theological study at Crozier Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania, where he was elected president of a predominantly white senior class, he was awarded a BD degree in 1951. With a fellowship won at Crozier, he enrolled in graduate studies at Boston University, completing his residence from the doctorate in 1953 and receiving the degree in 1955. In Boston, he met and married Coretta Scott, a young woman of uncommon intellectual and artistic attainments. 2 sons and 2 daughters were born into the family. In 1954, Martin Luther King became pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. Always a strong worker for civil rights for members of his race, King went by this time a member of the Executive Committee of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, also known as the NAACP, the leading organization of its kind in the nation. He was ready then, early in December 1955, to accept the leadership of the great first Negro nonviolent demonstration of contemporary times in the United States. The bus boycott described the Gunnar Jean in his presentation speech in honor of the laureate. The boycott lasted 382 days on December 21, 1956. After the Supreme Court of the United States had declared unconstitutional the laws requiring segregation on buses, Negroes and whites rode the buses as equals. During these boycott days, King was arrested, his home was bombed, was subject to personal abuse. He emerged as a Negro leader and the first of his rank. In 1957, he was elected president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an organization formed to provide new leadership for the now burgeoning civil rights movement. The ideals for this organization he took from Christianity, its operational techniques from Gandhi. In the 11-year period between 1957 and 1968, King traveled over 6 million miles and spoke over 2,500 times, appearing wherever there was injustice, protest, and action. And meanwhile, he wrote 5 books as well as numerous articles. In these years, he led a massive protest in Birmingham, Alabama, that caught the attention of the entire world, providing what he called a coalition of conscience, and inspiring his letter from a Birmingham jail, a manifesto of a Negro revolution. He planned the drives in Alabama for the registration of Negroes as voters. He directed the peaceful march in Washington, D.C. of 250,000 people to whom he delivered his address, "I have a dream." He conferred with President John F. Kennedy and campaigned for President Lyndon B. Johnson. He was arrested upwards of 20 times and assaulted at least 4 times. He was awarded 5 honorary degrees, was named Man of the Year by Time magazine in 1963, and became not only a symbolic leader of American blacks, but also a world figure. At the age of 39, Martin Luther King Jr. was the youngest man to have received a Nobel Peace Prize. When notified of his selection, he announced that he would turn over the prize money of $54,123 to the furtherance of the civil rights movement. On the evening of April 4th, 1968, while standing on the balcony of his motel room in Memphis, Tennessee, where he was to lead a protest march in sympathy with striking garbage workers of that city, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated.
This man